So for this adventure, um, behind me you see the remnants of what we had as a raised garden. We built this during the pandemic. Um, Actually, it wasn't even all that successful. Uh, we were able to raise some things, but otherwise, we're not much for gardening. Anyway, the plan is I'm going to dismantle all of that stuff and we're going to build a new shed. So this is not a mechanical adventure. This is a shed building. The shed is primarily meant for storage right now. Reason being, off there behind me is an old barn. And the barn, it's been here, I don't know, at least 150 years, if not more. Um, it's right now it's got some stuff in it, and not a lot of stuff, but I need to put that stuff somewhere else because we need to tear down that barn and level out that spot, and then continue on. But so this this garden's got to go, and I don't have a lot of flat ground in our property here. There's this isn't even really flat, but it's flat-ish, close enough. And so I'm going to build it's a 10 by 16 shed for storage, but I'm going to build it in such a way that when I no longer need it for storage, which means that we'll have to get rid of all the stuff that we're putting in it or put it somewhere else or rearrange something, then it's going to actually be a bunkie. So it's a 10 by 16 building, and it's going to be, it'll have a shed roof. So the front wall will be like 12-ish feet high and the back wall will be 8-ish feet high. So there's a possibility of putting a little loft in it. Yeah, so just a bunkie we can have after we don't need it for storage. I've got some used windows I'm going to use. I'm going to build this fairly cheaply. I'm going to take you along on what the actual costs are, because when I do stuff, it's not exactly overbuilt. It's going to be good enough. It'll last a long time, but I'm going to do this on the cheap. And so far, I've got all the lumber I need, I think, and all of the OSB and siding panels that I need. I don't have the roofing yet, but so far I've got 2,000 invested in all the materials that are required to do this, plus another couple $100 for what I'm going to use for foundation, which is deck blocks and screening and that type of thing. It's going to be an interesting one. I'm picking the time of the year I'm picking to do this is middle of May, which is black fly season, so that's fun. Anyway, we'll see what we can do here. So the first job, of course, is going to be dismantling this thing. Okay, so this should actually not take very long. Wasn't that well put together. I mean, I kind of slammed it together during pandemic, so it's a matter of taking out these poles. Okay, so with the garden gone, this is what I've laid out. So I've laid out the footprint of the building, which is 16 by 10. And for foundation, because this is a small building, I'm not going to put a big cement foundation. And what I've done is I've used 1/4-inch gravel in each of these 6 spots. And I have large cement blocks on each one. And I've leveled off each one of the blocks. So the blocks themselves are level. They're not level with each other yet. So my next plan, using 6-inch lumber, is to put the 6-inch lumber in each of the indents in the blocks. And I'm going to start with back here. This is the high point. This is not even close to level here, but this is as level as I can get around here. So starting with this one, making this level to this guy over here and this guy over here, depending on how much I have to build up each one of those. And then making this one level with that and that one as well. And then finally this corner, make that level, this one level, and then everything should be good and level on the lumber that's built up in each one of the indents in each of the cement blocks. I've got 6x6 hemlock beams. They're 8 foot long, so I'm going to run, I have 4 of them. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So then I'll end up with 2 beams coming across that are level with each other, side to side and back and forth. And that'll be the platform I build on top of. So the method I'm using to level from one block to another is not rocket science. Basically, I've already got that corner there level with the far corner post. Just take a straight board here, bring it up to where it's level, which is right there. Then on this sort of scrap piece of 6x6, oops, I make a mark there, and then all I'm going to do is measure from there to there and cut a piece off a new 6x6 and put that in, and they'll be level across. So that one there was successful, so we're just going to continue on with the other 3 blocks. So I made a classic mistake. I spent most of the day getting everything lined up. The beams are perfectly parallel to each other. I made sure they were square by measuring diagonal to diagonal, and then I started with some extra bracing here on the uprights that are bigger. I can't put in all the bracing because I do have to get underneath to put on the bottom of the floor. You'll see that a little bit later. But I thought, well, the next thing is going to be the floor. I got to start prepping the floor joists, and I measured out started measuring the beams to measure the 16 on center for each of the floor joists. I was going to mark that all along. Turns out the beams I bought are not 8 feet. They're actually 8 and a bit. And it's not exactly even how much a bit is. So that kind of threw a couple of things into, so obviously I've got to make them 8 feet. Otherwise they're going to stick out from underneath the cabin. It's going to look dumb. But second of all, by cutting off the ends of them and just making each one 8 feet, that throws off my squareness, if you will. So I had to kind of adjust where I'm going to cut. Did a bunch more measuring. And so next step is to cut the ends of the joists off, or the beams off. The fun part is these are 6x6s. I'm full 6x6, not 5.5 by 5.5. This is rough lumber. This is hemlock. So I think if I just run the circular across the top and down the sides, and then finish the rest with a reciprocating saw, should be good. My alternative is chainsaw. That's kind of a nuclear approach. I'm probably not going to do that. I think I've got it though. I think we're good. So, yeah. So, classic thing, but something to keep in mind if you're buying rough lumber and things like that. Don't never assume your lumber is the size you ordered. Never assume it's 96 inches on the dot. Most of the time, the lumberyard stuff is, especially the pressure treated, fancy, expensive stuff. But when you're buying from the rougher lumber, chances are it's not exactly, so you're going to have to trim. I just completely forgot about that. Anyway, luckily caught it, and we'll carry on. So I've got the front half of the floor joist on. What I did, I am working by myself here, so you have to be a little sometimes creative how you do things. I lined up all of the floor joists. I measured off and put them where they were supposed to be going across. And then the problem was to put on the board on the side here. The way that I achieve that, because it's just me, I don't have anybody else to hold it up, is I screwed in temporarily these little lifts on the front and the back, and that holds the board in place while I get it nailed there. The reason I only did half of the floor is because I am putting thin plywood underneath the floor, so I'm going to slip it. The floor is not attached to the beams, it's just sitting on there, so I'm going to slip the plywood underneath of the floor and then nail it in from underneath so it's good and secure. The reason that I'm putting plywood underneath is because I'm going to be insulating the floor, and I want to make sure that no critters and mice and things like that get up in there and start building nests and bugs and whatever. So I'm going to tape the joints of the plywood together as well after I get it on there. The reason I only did half of the floor and I need to put the plywood under half is because I am doing this from underneath. I am planning on putting a cross brace between there from side to side just to add a little more stability. And once I do that, it'll be very difficult to get underneath of the, well, I suppose I might be able to get into it from under there. But for now, I think this is the way I'm going to do it so I can get underneath. And then once that front half is done, then I can move on and finish up here at the back and put the plywood on the underneath of the back. Once the plywood's all underneath and the floor is complete, then I'll put in the insulation and then vapor barrier on top of that, and then the 3/4 inch floor on top of that. And how do you, as one person, hold up all the 2x8 floor joists while you're trying to slip plywood under it? By lifting it up and putting in some temporary scraps of wood to hold it for you. I'm always looking for things that can hold my wood or hold stuff for me as I do all this stuff myself. So now that I have that gap there, goodbye, Mr. Ant. That allows me to get underneath. I just got to square it up. And the other thing by putting plywood underneath, the other thing this does is make sure that your floor is actually square, because plywood is pretty much perfectly square, and this will get it right where you need it to be. Sometimes your tongue and groove OSB is a real pain in the butt and doesn't like to go together, and the tongues are all frayed or whatever. And you know, this wasn't used old stuff. This was brand new, right from the building supply place. But that's the way it comes. And then getting it together when you're by yourself is difficult sometimes if you're trying to line things up. So I've come up with what I think is an ingenious method of doing this. Put a screw in so that I can level that up. But when I do that, I can't obviously bang on the other end of this. So I have a ratchet strap. And we're going to try to suck these together this way. Here goes nothing. Oh, I see my problem over there. Wasn't quite lined up. I just need to get it started in the groove, which I think it is, and then I can bang it in from there. So always use a board so you don't smash up your... Huzzah! It worked. Always find ways of working by yourself. So that's got the tongue in there. I got to bang it in, obviously, the rest of the way. But sometimes a little creativity helps. And once again, I've got my hammer, my ratchet strap, screw, holding the tongue and groove level. So the ratchet strap becomes a helping hand. There it goes. Is there anything you can't do with a ratchet strap?